Welcome to Introspection, the podcast about moving from grief to growth. I'm Amy Lindner Lesser, your host. Introspection started out as a podcast about hospitality, innkeeping, and innkeepers. After about a year, I realized that my life and interests have morphed from hospitality to helping others navigate from grief and loss to growth and living. In this new version of Introspection, I will be talking about my personal experiences with loss, and there are quite a few, what I've learned along the way through my professional training, as well as from my coaching experiences. I'll also be bringing in guests to share interesting ideas. So grab a beverage, find a comfy place, take a deep breath, and listen in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Introspection from Grief to Growth. I'm your host, Amy Lindner Lesser, and I want to start with reading to you the little message on my calendar for the day. It says, a happiness hack. Never miss an opportunity to celebrate. Relish every win, big and small. I don't believe in coincidences. Personally, I believe in synchronicity and divine synchronicity. And I was in a meeting with a mentor of mine and met today's guest through that. It turns out she and I had been Facebook friends because we also worked with a previous coach. So my guest today is Elizabeth Barbour, and she's the author of a book, Sacred Celebrations, Designing Ritual to Navigate Life's Transitions, appropriate for my message this morning. Let me tell you a little bit about Elizabeth before I have her join us on here. So she graduated from William and Mary with degrees in biology and psychology. But along the way, through personal triumph and tragedy, discovered that ritual was her passion and the best pathway to this crazy roller coaster of life. For more than 2 decades, she's helped her clients live more magical and meaningful lives as an intuitive life and business coach and shamanic practitioner. She is a creative force when it comes to releasing pain, healing wounds, transforming old stories into new beginnings, and celebrating the beauty and joy of life's milestones. I love that Elizabeth talks about rituals for both happy celebrations as well as for the events that mark the transitions that may be more painful in our lives. For the past 20 years, rituals have become a cornerstone of Elizabeth's life, from beating her furniture with a tennis racket to release the anger at her ex-husband, to conducting a heartfelt white rose ceremony at her mother's memorial. She uses rituals to navigate, heal, celebrate, and connect deeply to her own life. Devoted to helping people unearth the beauty and sacredness of their lives, she helps make rituals accessible for everyone. She lives in one of my favorite places in the world, Asheville, North Carolina, with her family, 2 and 4-legged, and oodles of soulmate friends. So help me welcome Elizabeth to Introspection.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was wonderful. And I just love that that was your message for the day. Never miss an opportunity to celebrate. Woohoo! You're talking my language.
The thing that's so interesting, and I was telling Rich, my producer, this, he and I share a birthday. And today that we're recording is February 12th. This is going to be aired next week, though. February 12th is our half birthday. And as a child, because my birthday was in the summer, my mother felt that that wasn't right. So she would make me a half birthday party. So I was introduced to celebrations and rituals very early on. I think my first half birthday party was in kindergarten, and I still have pictures and amazing memories. So the whole day has been about rituals.
I love that your mom knew what it was all about, and she understood that a family birthday at home in the summer might not be nearly as much fun for a little kid as being with classmates and friends. How special.
Right? Especially after going to everybody else's party and giving them presents and then not being able to be on the receiving end.
That's great.
So I've been reading your book and I have been thoroughly enjoying it.
Thank you.
I think the first ritual that you talk about is what you did with your divorce. And you talked about a final conversation. I mean, first of all, it sounded like while it wasn't a horrible divorce, it wasn't an easy divorce. I don't think any of them are.
No.
But I loved the final conversation with your ex-husband. Can you tell our viewers and listeners about that?
Sure. I had been married to my high school sweetheart, and we had done a lot of growing up together. And even though our marriage ended and ended a lot sooner than I expected, we only ended up being married for about 5.5 years. It was still filled with lots of love and good memories and growth. And so when we were going through the final process of divorce, we were living in Philly at the time, and he moved to Seattle, and I ended up moving to Asheville, North Carolina. And so, we were in touch throughout that time, but I said, when everything gets finalized, let's talk about what we loved about each other, what we learned from each other, and what we wish for each other in our future. And I had emailed him these questions, which I share in the book. And, at first he kind of grumbled like, oh, do we really have to do this? But then, he said, no, you're right. We need to do this. And we had the day that he went to the courthouse and sort of finalized everything and made it all official. We had a really sweet conversation, remembering the pets that we had together and the trips that we had taken together and family gatherings and all of that. And it was a really sweet and tender way to wrap things up and say, okay, we're done here. We're complete.
Yeah, I loved that. And I loved the question about how have you grown from this relationship, and also to end it with what are your wishes for the other person. It allows for silver linings, positivity, and not just negative feelings. And I know there was a lot by reading some of the things, beating your furniture, breaking things, you know, and this way it was building instead of destroying. And
Yes.
I think too often divorce is it's a death. It's a death of an inanimate object.
Yes.
It's the death of a future.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sadness and grief. And I talk about this a lot, and you talk about it, that we have a grief adverse society.
Yes.
And it's more than just grief. It's really any of the more difficult emotions. We don't want to talk about them. It's like, because everybody else is uncomfortable,
Right.
but we need to move through them in order to get to the other side. And if you don't, and we don't allow people to express, then it doesn't happen.
Right, right. Well, and what I've learned over the years too, both personally and with coaching my clients, is that the sooner you're willing to experience the whole gamut of emotions, the good, the bad, the ugly, the quicker you'll move through whatever you're facing. When I think about, so I've actually been married and divorced twice. And the first time I was very much in victim mode and was like, woe is me and my life is over. And also I was young and, didn't have as much life experience. Second time, such a completely different experience. And it's also a different relationship because I'm still co-parenting with, I call him my beloved Eric, my ex-husband. And, we're still dear friends and we still do family vacations. And so, our ritual, which is very different from my first divorce 20 years ago, is that every year on our wedding anniversary, we go out to dinner with our daughter and we celebrate our family anniversary.
I love that.
And we just say, okay, this is where we are now, and so but certainly there were lots of negative and hard emotions to get there, and that all happened as well. So I think it's really carrying the both and, being able to address the hard stuff, but then also honor the good stuff, as you said, the growth. And I love how you shared at the beginning. You said you talk about grief and shifting from grief and loss to growth and living. And that's, I think, what rituals help us do.
And I love that. I think many of us probably have rituals without even realizing what they are.
Yes.
So can you define what a ritual is for all of us?
Well, the way I write about ritual in the book is I feel like ritual is a sacred container that helps us to really be present in the moment. And particularly in this book, Sacred Celebrations, it's about helping us navigate transitions. So of course we do have, daily rituals. But even some of those, having your cup of tea or your cup of coffee in the morning, that can be a ritual of transition. You're transitioning from quiet time at home to maybe getting ready to get in the car, drive on the interstate, go to work. That's it's like a little mini transition, and we have it every day, but it's still a transition. But I feel like the bigger rituals, let's talk about, weddings or funerals or divorce rituals or a house blessing ceremony or a retirement party, whatever it is that you're going to talk about. It's a sacred container to slow down and pause and to be present and to reflect on, what are the beauty and the joy and the growth and the hardships and the challenges and whatever, and then sort of honor and acknowledge and celebrate all of that. And then also make a plan for the future. What's next? The ritual is like you're standing on the threshold between what was and what is to be. So it's sort of a time to look back, but also a time to look ahead.
And it can be very scary because we know what the past was. We sort of know where we are right now, and we may not completely know that, but we don't really know about the future. None of us can really read the future. And it's open to all kinds of things. And so, in some ways, for some of us who have to be in control, it's very scary. For others who can say, I know there are going to be ups and downs because that's life. And it's a matter of figuring out how to be on that seesaw or teeter totter, whatever you call it, and be the person who's more up than more down, or
Yeah.
to be balanced. That's an okay place too. Yeah. And I love that there are rituals for every day, every morning. Some people do coffee in the morning first thing. I don't drink coffee, but I have my ritual. I come into my office and I sit down and I do puzzles. I used to think that when I walked into the kitchen at my inn, when I had an inn, I would grab the newspaper and I would do the crossword puzzle and the Sudoku. And I would feel guilty thinking that I was wasting time. And then someone reminded me that I wasn't, that what I was doing was I was priming my brain to be able to think in a more critical way than you do when you're sleeping. And so now I do Wordle, I do connections. I do the mini crossword puzzle from the Times. I do another crossword puzzle and I do a Sudoku. And then I'm like, okay, that's been a half hour. Now it's time to get to work doing whatever I'm doing.
Wow. And your brain is ready to rock and roll now for the day because you've had time to transition. Oh, I love that.
And I no longer feel like I'm wasting time. That what I'm doing is I'm keeping my brain active, so it's not withering away. Hopefully, I'm staving off dementia,
Right.
and it's fun. And on the days that I don't have the time to do that, I really feel like I've missed something.
Yes. Yes. I love that. That's such a great example of something that's a little um, maybe unusual. Probably not everybody wakes up and does, the Times crossword puzzle and Sudoku and all that, first thing in the morning. You're reminding me when my daughter was younger, I don't do this anymore because she's 14 now. But when she was a toddler, I always prioritize doing just 10 or 15 minutes of yoga stretches in the morning. And she would come in the room with me and she would crawl around on the floor. So if I was like doing downward dog, she'd be like underneath me. And sometimes if I was doing cat cow, she might climb up on my back. And so it was this sweet little ritual of us having time together, but also me waking up my body and getting ready, to enter the day.
Right now, I'm studying Reiki and
Mm.
getting ready to do my Reiki master training.
Ooh.
And one of the things that you learn in the first Reiki is how to do self Reiki. And a lot of people do it when they get into bed at night to relax themselves. And I joke because I get into bed, I roll onto my stomach, I look at my iPad thinking, I'm going to read. Next thing I know, I'm doing jigsaw puzzles. And then I'm asleep in 3 minutes. So I'm like, I never have the time to do self Reiki. Although, if I have trouble sleeping, I will do some self Reiki as a ritual to get back to bed.
Yeah, that's great.
It's fun and I'm enjoying it.
Good, good, good.
I've also read about the ritual around your mother's death, that you had planned a funeral and you talked about the funeral was in Florida, right?
Correct.
And you didn't live in Florida, you lived in Texas at the time, and felt that the funeral was more for her friends, not for you. And I think that's really important that funerals there at one point you talk about talking to your mother about a funeral and she's like, it's for you, it's not for me. I'm not going to be there. And I love that because that's true. Funerals are for the living. They're for the people who are left behind, and they are, whether they're religious or not religious, they're ways to help deal with the loss. And I love that you took that experience and created a ritual for you and for your women friends around mothers in general.
Yes. Well, and so so interesting you bring that up, Amy, because that is one ritual I didn't set out to do. I mean, I knew mom was dying. And when she actually passed, I just thought, okay, I'm going to have 3 weeks or so until we can get to Florida and do this funeral. And my girlfriend Danielle called me and she said, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm planning a funeral in Florida. She said, no, 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 you have to do something here now. And I said, well, why? And she said, because we all want to show up and support you. And so really, I mean, it wasn't even my initiation, it was hers. And then I responded to that saying, wow, my girlfriends really want to show up. And so, mom died on a Sunday night and it was that Friday that we did the white rose ceremony. And I probably had 35 friends come and only maybe 2 or 3 of them had actually met my mother.
Many of us go to funerals or go to wakes or whatever for people we've never met, but we're going because of the connection we have to the grieving person, the bereaved.
Absolutely. And I always think you learn so much too. I have a girlfriend, Meg, whose dad passed away last year. And I happened to be in the same city as where his funeral was at the time that it all happened. And so I went to the funeral along with some other girlfriends, and I learned so much about my friend and her dad and her family. And it was just a really rich opportunity to have a different perspective on somebody. I did you ever read the book Tuesdays with Maury?
I did.
Yeah, I feel like we should all have our funerals before we die. We want to be around to hear the nice things that people say about us.
I think we should always ask that should be another ritual. And maybe it's a birthday ritual that you're surrounded by your friends and you can say, I don't want any gifts. Don't spend money on anything, but please write something that you can read about me.
Yes, I love that. Or tell stories or whatever. Yes.
I know for I think it was my 50th birthday, I threw myself two parties. My husband had already passed away, and so I threw a big barbecue um, at my inn, and there were like 100 and something people who showed up during the afternoon. It was an open house, and it was great. And then that evening, I did a smaller, very close family and friends. And one of my friends wrote sort of a roast, but the roast had stories of us as teenagers and us growing up together because we've known each other since I was 7 and she was 6. So we really have grown up together. And it was wonderful to hear those stories and to see we're so different. We would never become friends if we met today. Yet, we see each other as more as sisters because there's a bond that, we would both do anything for each other.
Yes.
And so that's wonderful to hear.
I love that you have that shared history. That's where what's the Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers wrote a song, "It takes a long time to make an old friend."
I love that.
And it's just so true, like someone that you've known since you were just in your formative years. Those relationships are so special. Like you, I also planned two birthdays for my 50th as well. I was living in Texas, and I think I write about them in the book. I was living in Texas, and we did a sort of a couples get together for a weekend in Hill Country in Texas, which is sort of south of Austin. And I remember when I moved to Texas, people said Hill Country. I'm like, there's no hills in Texas, but there are. There's a few of them.
But they're hills, they're not mountains.
Right, they're hills, yeah, not mountains. And then a week later, I flew back up here to North Carolina, and Oprah was in Charlotte, and so I had some of my dearest girlfriends from Asheville drive down to Charlotte, and we all went to see Oprah together. So that was kind of fun.
I used to dream about having a 50th birthday party with just women friends that we would go somewhere. It didn't happen, but it was a great idea.
You can do it for your next big one. That's okay. You don't have to wait for a big one. I think that's the other thing. We tend to plan big rituals when there's a big event, the birthdays that end in 0, or, like wedding anniversaries, or, whatever. But you can do it anytime. You really can.
Well, and once you get to my age, you celebrate every birthday.
There you go. Well, you're still 29. You're still 29 though, right? Every time.
28, yep.
Okay.
Of course, my older daughter just turned 40.
Wow. Okay.
How is that possible? And another friend who I've known, we joke about this. I've known her since her father and my mother were in elementary school together.
Wow.
That's how far back our families have known each other. But Lisa and I have known each other since I guess I came home from the hospital from being born. She's 3 months older than I am. And, our lives have crossed, they've grown apart, we've grown back together. My younger daughter and her older daughter are 3 months to the day apart in age. And they were each bridesmaids at each other's weddings.
Oh,
So, and I'm still friends with her. It's just a wonderful, wonderful celebration. But they just celebrated their 49th wedding anniversary.
wow.
And I said, "How is that possible? I'm not even 49 years old." And I was at that wedding. There were two of us, two friends, who were witnesses. And I'm like, but there's no way I'm that old. So, what other rituals have you been involved with? Have you suggested to people?
Well, gosh, lots of different ones. One I'll share that, again, I think I write about it in the book, but one of the very first rituals that I did was with a coaching client of mine who had come to me, and this was very early in my coaching career. I was in my young 30s and very green. But this client came to me to talk about business stuff. But as it turned out, she ended up sharing with me that she and her husband had been trying to have a baby and had struggled with infertility issues. And they had just finally come to the conclusion that they were going to choose a child-free life. And I said, okay, well, that sounds really big and monumental. What if you created a ritual around that? And she said, oh, that's a great idea. And so together in our coaching, we helped her to design a ritual that she then invited, a couple just very close friends and family to participate in. I don't think her husband was part of that. I think it was just she and some women friends. But to really help her to honor and acknowledge her grief and loss about realizing that I guess in this lifetime, I'm not going to be a mom this time around. And then also allowing her to embrace, so what's possible with child-free living? And, wow, we're going to be able to travel and we'll have more pets and we'll probably have more money and, all of the things that go along with that. So it was a really, really powerful ritual for her to be able to do. And then, what was interesting was, I would have never known at the time that more than a decade later, I would be doing my own grief ritual around miscarriages that I had. I had a twin pregnancy that ended in miscarriage. And my husband and I did a ritual at the ocean around letting those babies go. And so now when I work, and that, it's a long time ago now, it's more than 14 years ago, but now when I work with people who have had some kind of major loss like that, I'm like, you got to do a ritual. And I think things like miscarriage is a good example when you ask me, what are some other things you recommend? Because I think so often we do the standard rituals, right? Like birthdays and weddings and anniversaries and, funerals and all of that. But things like miscarriage are sort of that silent grief. And so, creating a ritual and inviting other people to witness us can really help us move through our grief. And I think that's true for even lesser griefs, things like, moving away. Maybe you get a job transfer and it's like, okay, well, this is great for our family and we're going to go have this exciting new opportunity, but oh, we're leaving our home and our neighbors and people that we love and care about. And there's grief along with the joy. So, having a ritual of just a simple goodbye party. And doing a house blessing for your home and walking around your home and thanking it for, holding you and your loved ones there.
And then the same thing to wherever you go,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
you have a house blessing and a welcome and whatever. I think for the most part, the days of the welcome wagon are gone. So
Yes.
usually nobody to welcome you into your new community. Something for realtors to think about.
Right. Yes.
I don't think people realize that when they're moving for a positive reason, and it could be, a job transfer, or you've always wanted to be somewhere and you got the job, that there is grief involved.
Yes.
I tell the story when I do a presentation on one of my books about the grief experience, is that joyful things also can cause grief. I talk about, both of my daughters are adopted, and coming home with them and realizing I had to get up in the middle of the night, or somebody did. It was like, oh my gosh, I went from having nothing. I didn't, I wasn't pregnant, to having a child to care for. I lost all my freedom. And then when my older daughter started toddling and walked into the bathroom, I was like, "Oh my god, I'm never gonna be able to have any privacy or any quiet time." Was I thrilled that she was walking and she needed mommy and she found mommy? Yes. Was I missing independence? Yes. The same thing for people when they first start either living together or they get married. It's like all of a sudden you don't only report to yourself. There's someone else you have to report to be a considerate person. And there's goes your independence.
So true. And I so appreciate you just sharing that. As that's something you and I share as both being adoptive mothers. And there does tend to be the focus on, oh, yay, you're finally a parent and you have this beautiful baby in your home. And there is grief and loss of that, of the change in circumstance. And, I have a chapter in a book coming out this year, and it's called The 36-Hour Pregnancy. And I write about how Riley came to us from the phone call to when we actually brought her home with us. And I start the chapter off saying there's a reason why we have 9 months to prepare for parenthood. Because you get to think about and plan for and work through all of those things mentally. But when you have an adoption like mine was, and I'm not sure what yours was like, but we didn't have any time to prepare, and you just get it done, just show up and make it happen.
Life quakes or life transitions and the aftershocks that follow are something we all experience. A life quake can stem from the heartbreaking grief that arises from the loss of a loved one, or the disorientation felt when life suddenly shifts due to the loss of a job, relationship, identity, or health challenge. Learning to navigate these transitions with mindfulness, grace, and self-compassion is the key to finding your way back to joy, happiness, and inner peace. Advanced Grief Recovery Method Specialist and Certified Life Transition Coach, Amy Lindner Lesser, MSW, expertly supports clients to navigate their life quakes and transitions with warmth, kindness, and grace. Learning to accept support as you navigate your way through the aftershocks is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. Learn more at introspection.com. That's introspection.com.
Yeah. I mean, for us, we made a phone call to my husband's cousin who married a Mexican who was a physician. That was Thanksgiving weekend, and said, "Do you think he could help us?" And we heard nothing until 2 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day, that following year. So it was, or that year, it was a few months later. And his cousin called and said, "A little girl was born this morning. Do you want her?" And, our immediate response was, "Oh my God, who died?" Because who calls at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
And then we were in Mexico for 5 weeks with each of our adoptions, doing all the work ourselves. And so I have friends who used to say we had the shortest pregnancy. So it was sort of like a 36-hour pregnancy. And then the delivery and labor was months, 6 weeks long before we finally came home. with our children each time. You do need the time. And if you're a woman who's going through infertility and trying still to get pregnant, you walk around and you go to the mall and you see nothing but pregnant people, whether they're teenagers who did not plan that, or they're even people who have a child and they're dragging a child, and that they're at their wits' end and parenthood is not what they wanted. And all you do is feel that it's inhuman and inhumane that because of biology, you're not the parent. So it's always there. And I love that there's a ritual.
Yeah, complex emotions for sure. I actually, just a few weeks ago, I was a guest on an adoption book club, or a book club centered on books that are around adoption. And they read my Sacred Celebrations book. And then we talked about rituals that you could use in the adoption community, whether it's everything from, bringing a child home to a biological mother who has relinquished a child, and having, a grief ritual around that. Their reunion rituals, when families are reunited after time spent apart. So, ritual applies in just about any aspect of life where there's some kind of big change.
I think in adoption, things have moved so that at least adoptive families often have gotcha days where you may not be celebrating the birth of a child, but you're celebrating when that child was born to your family, when they joined your family. And I think that's wonderful. I even have a gotcha day for my dog.
Oh.
I have no idea when he was born. He was rescued and came up to Vermont from South Carolina, but I know when I got him. So we have a gotcha day.
Oh, that's sweet. So, well, and I think, that brings up a good point. I think pet rituals are really important. Whether it's spending time with them on a regular basis, when you come home and greeting them after a busy day, but then also, when they are sick or when they're, about to pass on. I remember when our dog Andy died years ago, and we just spent a whole day of, you could call it ritual. I mean, it wasn't planned necessarily, but it was, giving him all his favorite treats and laying in the sunshine and giving him belly rubs and everything, knowing that, he was on his way out. So
I happen to be Jewish, and in the Jewish tradition, we have a ritual of lighting a candle the night before an anniversary of somebody's death.
Ah,
And that's called the yahrzeit and a yahrzeit candle. And I've always had an issue with it. And I've always said, why do we commemorate the day they died? Why not celebrate the day they were born and they came into this world and then had their gifts to share? And so I sort of said, the heck with tradition. And I now light a candle the night before their birthday.
oh, nice.
Think about, my husband and my parents and everybody else who was important to me. That's when I light my candle and celebrate their life, because I would much rather celebrate the positives than, not that I won't remember the date of their death, but I don't want to spend so much time on it. I don't need more reasons to be sad.
I'm so glad that you shared that, Amy, because that's really one of the messages of my book in Sacred Celebrations. It's really about personalizing rituals in a way that works for you and that speaks to your heart and your mind and your spirit and what's going to lift you up and bring you joy. And if doing things the tried and true or traditional way doesn't feel right, then modify it and make it work for you. That's such a great example of that ritual does not have to be prescriptive. There's not just one right way to do it. It's do whatever works for you. That's a great story.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few of those. what rituals do you still bring into your life? Obviously you're not doing a ritual around your mother's passing or your divorces, but
Right. Well, one of the rituals I do, I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but probably once a week, I spend time at my ancestral altar. So I have an altar set up in my home that has pictures of my parents. So I'm also adopted as well as being an adoptive mom. So I have four parents, my mom and dad who raised me, and then my birth mom and birth dad. So three of my four parents have passed on. So I have photos of them and my grandparents and some of my pets that have passed on. And so I spend a little bit of time at my ancestral altar every week and just kind of, I don't know, I'll just stand there and talk to them. Sometimes I'll light a candle. Sometimes I'll bring offerings and treats. Sometimes I'll say prayers or I'll ask for guidance or help. And other times I just sit there and say, thanks. So that's one that's a pretty consistent ritual for me. I would say the other one, especially now that I live back in the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, I lived here 15, 20 years ago, moved away for a long time, and then just came back about 2 years ago. One of my big rituals is hiking. And people might say, oh, well, that's just exercise, but it's not. There's something very distinct and different about intentionally going into the woods versus just going to the gym to have a workout. It's a very different experience. So
it's in some ways it's similar to walking a labyrinth, that you
yes,
go in with an intention and you're focused on that thought. And so while you're walking or hiking, you're thinking about something purposely as opposed to being in a gym and walking a treadmill.
I love that. What about you? What are some of your rituals? Do you have any daily rituals?
Um, I have a New Year's Eve ritual, which is I've never loved New Year's Eve. I love the idea of a new year, but the partying and people getting drunk and staying out and to me the craziness that goes on in the world, I've never been interested in. So after my husband passed away, I started writing a letter to him every New Year's Eve. And I write what has gone on in my life, the things about our children, how they've grown, what's happened in their lives, the things that he's physically missing. I believe he's there anyway, but the physical stuff. And I continue to do that. I have a ritual with my grandson, who's almost 9, and right now they live in Virginia. They're going to be moving, I think, to California. I mean, they move every 3 years, so I don't get to see him as often as I'd like, but he loves cats. And his mom, my daughter, is allergic. So our ritual is that one day when I'm visiting, I take him out of school and we go have breakfast, and he eats more than anybody I know. He has breakfast, we've been going, and then he gets water ice, and then we go to a cat cafe.
Oh, yay!
And he gets to play for an hour or two with tons of cats and kittens, and then we can go home to his mom and it's like, okay, we both got it out of our systems, and I'm not bringing any more cats home, and he's not either. And we've had a wonderful time, and it's our time together, and it's our ritual.
I love it. The cat cafe ritual. That's awesome. He's going to remember that. I mean, because there's probably going to be a day, maybe when he's like 15 or 16, when he's like, Grandma, I don't want to do that anymore. But, he's going to remember that when he's little.
I'm not sure that he will ever say, I don't want to do that anymore, because
Oh, good.
we've seen teenagers come in with their parents. And so that's normalized it for him. And he's a very sensitive, sweet boy.
Oh, that's great. That's a really special ritual. Well, and that's such a great point. I bet there are a lot of grandparents who have really special rituals with their grandkids. It's very different, I would imagine, than being a parent.
Yes. Oh, it's so wonderful. Oh, you're having a temper tantrum here. Go to your parents. So I'm now looking forward. He has a 2.5-year-old sister. So I'm now looking forward to when she's 3.5, and she and I can start something. She's still a little too young to do anything. But with him, he was learning to read. So what we did was I asked his mom to buy 2 copies of whatever books the school was recommending. And so she sent me a copy, and I would get on either Zoom or on FaceTime, and we would read together. He would read the book, and I'd help him sound out the words he couldn't get. And that also became a ritual during COVID until he was like, Grandma, I can read. I don't need you.
I love that. I actually remember that my mother was still living and my daughter was about 5 during COVID. Yeah, and mom would just sit and read to her. So it's neat.
Yeah. And I loved it, because especially since he's so far away,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
hard to get that time
Yes.
together. So what else would you like to share?
The next book that I'm writing is actually called Living in Reunion, and it's about building healthy, long-term relationships for families separated by adoption. And so I've been interviewing, almost 30 people now, adoptees and adoptive parents and biological parents, and talking about what their reunion experiences have been like and what have been the challenges and what have been the joys. And it's been a good decade or so since a good book about reunion has been written. And, things are changing, especially with people using Ancestry.com and 23andMe and all the other genetic, matching. So I think it's time for some fresh perspective and insights on that. So,
With your background as both an adoptee and an adoptive parent, you have so much to share with that.
Yeah, and I've been in reunion with my biological family for 25 years now, and I have 11 half brothers and sisters, and and have good relationships with everybody. So it takes a lot of work, and it takes some time. And of course, we don't see each other nearly as much as I would like to. But yeah, so that's the next big project I'm working on, and I continue to coach and speak, and I lead women's retreats, and so yeah, life is busy and good.
And if our listeners would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can visit either one of my websites. So ElizabethBarbour.com, and Barbour is spelled Barbour, just so folks know. And then also sacredcelebrations.com. In addition to the book there, I also have a jewelry line of intentional gemstone jewelry, and also some other gift kits. So those can be a good way for people who want to have a tangible reminder of their ritual. So a lot of the people that I serve might order, 4 bracelets or 10 bracelets if they're doing, like, maybe it's gifts for their bridesmaids and their wedding, or maybe it's a women's retreat and a bunch of high school or college friends are getting together and going away. And so it's a ritual talisman of their time together. So
this has been wonderful. I really enjoyed speaking with you and sharing rituals, and hopefully our viewers will share their rituals with us, either in the notes or contact one of us to share. And I look forward to the next book.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun talking with you, and I love some of the rituals that you shared with me too. So you gave me some new ideas to share with folks. So.
Well, it's been my pleasure speaking with you and sharing. So awesome. Thank you. And to our viewers and listeners, we'll see you again soon. If you liked what you heard on this podcast and want to hear more, please follow us and tell your friends. You can also find me on Facebook at Amy Lindner Lesser, Grief to Growth Life Coaching, and on LinkedIn at Amy Lindner Lesser. Thanks again for listening.